Hi, I'm Tom Gale, and I'm excited to welcome you to this second of a special MDM three-part video series on ways for distribution leadership teams to think about managing transformation and change management, and how to get the most value from these initiatives. My guest is Bill Dudziak, lead strategic consultant for PROS. Bill has facilitated many implementations of transformational technology in his current role, as well as in his career with large distribution and retail companies. In our conversations, we're exploring the components of successful change management projects and journeys. Today, we're focusing on the vision for change. Bill, we're talking about how to take that vision of a future state for an organization, whether it's been created internally or a consultant has brought in, and translating that into a reality. And what we're really talking about is communication. Why is this all about communication?
Communication is so important because it really is used to overcome the emotional component associated with any change. In addition, it conveys the need for change. It kind of creates that burning platform and gives the ability for everyone to accept this change, to adopt it, and really to champion it and move forward. It paints a picture of the future and talks about where we are today, why the current status quo is not working, and why we need to move to this future state. And finally, it conveys a sense of urgency so that it gets everybody moving along the same path at a rapid pace.
So you can have kickoff meetings, put out plans, documents. But what this comes down to is really motivating, moving people, and getting people to accept probably a lot of discomfort and change. So we're talking about a lot of emotions. Can you talk a little bit about sort of that cycle or the process that's involved with change management in that?
Absolutely. And I'll talk a little bit personally first. I've got 6 kids, and the last one is now going through their teenage years. And anybody who's asked a teenager to do something different, whether it be taking out the garbage, rapidly sees that emotional component in asking for any change. So I'm going to refer back to the Kubler-Ross grief cycle, and that goes through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And so when I asked my teenage daughter to take out the garbage, probably I'm met with a very funny look. But after that, it is complete denial, like she hasn't heard me. And then it's something like, oh my goodness, why do I need to take out the garbage? Or how about I load the dishwasher instead? And then, oh, everybody's always so mean to me. Why am I the one always have to take out the garbage? And then finally, 30 minutes later, the garbage might be taken out. And that's that acceptance portion. And really, so you see that in a microcosm, way amplified because of all the teenage angst. But really, you're going to see that with your employees as well, anytime you ask them to do something different. And it may be something like a new manager. It may be new processes. Today, we're focusing on technology, but that same change path is going to be evident every single time you bring in something new to the organization.
So how do you see that communication taking place across an organization? Where are the responsibilities, the roles, and how does that move throughout the organization?
That's a great point. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier, right? So first, I want to say change communication is everybody's responsibility. Whether you're an executive, a senior manager, where you're on the product team leading the change, where you're department heads and inline supervisors who are having to push the change down in the trenches, or if you're just a person who is being put through the change, change is incumbent on everybody, and change communication is incumbent on everybody. So first, executives. Executives have to be the voice of the business and push forward that strategic messaging. We mentioned it earlier, but why change? The imperative for the change. So what is it that we're not doing correctly today? And where is this change hoping to lead to? And finally, you have to tacitly give permission for the change. This can be done through a town hall or an email or a newsletter that you mentioned earlier, Tom. Supervisors and department heads have to lead that more personal message. It can be individualized for where they are in the grief cycle or that level of acceptance. It has to really convey that reassurance and confirmation that, yes, we are going through it. It's going to be okay. It's informational and communicational during that denial and anger stage, more emotional support when you get through bargaining and depression, and then finally the guidance and the direction during the acceptance. So the communication messages and vehicles are different. Personalized from your department heads and your supervisors, more business oriented and strategic through the executive leadership. And again, those department heads, it should not be through email. It should be one-on-one, which encourages feedback, and you're able to work through that emotional component that you aren't able to do in an email or a town hall.
You know, it seems as though increasingly, particularly with technology transformation, whether it's e-commerce, pricing, whatever the company may be taking on, it is a huge shift in processes, but increasingly there's cross-functional teams that are being put together to address this. So as you talked about the supervisors and department heads, how have you seen it play out really effectively in terms of how those teams work together to, you know, have a very clear and aligned messaging that actually resonates and sort of ensures the success of whatever project or process they're working on?
That's a great point, Tom, and it really comes through coordination. So when you think about setting forth your communication strategy within the project team, you really need to lay out everything ahead of time. Who's going to be saying what form they're going to be saying it. So at the beginning of the project, you have the executives come forward and you have a town hall is a great way to do it. I much prefer a town hall, even if it's through Zoom over an email mass communication, because that gives some form of personalization, right? And so that is scheduled, the points are made. And then as the project moves forward, you have rippling down, so you'll get lower levels of the organization, reinforcing that same message, but doing it in a more personalized manner, that one-to-one feedback, those weekly and daily stand-ups that you have with your sales teams, that's very important. In addition, it's very important to make sure that you don't say things once and forget about it. The average person needs to hear things 5 to 7 times for it to resonate and really to take hold within their new mantra and their new workday procedures. So reinforcing it with additional communication, having follow-ups every quarter and giving updates on how the project is going, making sure that you celebrate a success. And at the beginning of the project, everything is going to be success. Either the technology performed as it's supposed to, or you learned something new on why it didn't perform as you expected. You course correct and you move forward. But that's just as important as learning as well. So celebrating those successes absolutely along the way. And again, communicating those very well. The ultimate goal of any project is to create demand for the project instead of trying to push it out. If you communicate those early successes, you see line managers being outperformed by those on the project and asking to have it being brought into their department, that is a great way to ensure success and instead of trying to push it down, push it down, push it down.
So there's a couple of things that came out of that for me, Bill, and one was specifically, and I know this depends on the scope of a particular project, but what does it look like in terms of the cadence of communication that you've seen that's really effective? You talked about 5 to 7 times in terms of making sure people really absorb what the communication is. Mm-hmm. Have you seen an effective cadence? I mean, is it once a week, or what does that look like in terms of making sure you're getting out the information and keeping it front and center for people?
I think I'm not sure that it's once a week or necessarily a defined cadence. I think you need to have a feedback loop coming from the sales groups or whatever organization that is adopting the change, and recognizing that you have to be fluid. There are things that you have to do, absolutely. There are some things that are going to resonate more than others. If you can tie things, the change to maybe a compensation system or have little spiff contests and things like that, that's fantastic, right? And so if you do that, the pace of change, I think, will be quicker than it would be in the absence of those items. So I'm not so sure that there's a set cadence. I think you have to think about where you are, taking that feedback with maybe anonymous surveys or just, getting updates from the supervisors who are talking to the people every day and adjusting your communication frequency, style, and message from there.
So I recall some examples of some distributors who had a designated person really leading a change management project, and that person would actually go out to every single branch and basically do a presentation, and it was really important in person. Now, what I would like for your take on is, what have you seen work really successfully? Can it be done? You mentioned Zoom in that, but the value of actually getting, if you're really trying to do some sort of a technology change, process change, of actually that face-to-face of getting somebody out at every single branch.
Yeah, I mentioned Zoom because that's kind of the reality of where we are today. But when I did this at a distribution company, I absolutely went out and visited every salesperson. And so the organization I worked for at that time had 2 main sales operations, but there were sales contained in some of the branches as well. So you want to form that personal connection such that if there is an issue, they can feel comfortable bringing that issue up to you so you can correct it, or so that you can feel comfortable reaching out to them and asking about problems that you may be seeing through reporting or adoption or something like that. So absolutely, that personal connection has to be made. It's just like if you're selling, right? If you're out there selling every day, you can't do that through just email and maybe through Zoom. You have to make that personal connection. As a project lead, you are selling the organization on this new technology or this new process you're pushing through. It's important to be that salesman and have that same level of connection as if you were a salesperson with your customer.
Great point. Final thing I want to touch on today is, as you look at how to make this vision for change really translate into reality, and these teams that do get put together, what have you seen in terms of the personality or the skill sets for the leader of that team that are the most effective? Where I'm coming from is that sometimes those teams are put together and there's some politics involved in terms of who the participants are. Mm-hmm. What have you seen to kind of break through that, and who the most effective change leaders in terms of the personality or skill set traits?
So I will tell you, when I was appointed lead of this pricing change and implementation of technology, I quickly realized that the job was much different than I thought it was going to be. I came out of a traditional finance role. I expected to be working with price elasticities and things like that, and quickly found out that pricing and change management has nothing to do with Greek symbols. So I think the leader of that organization has to do a self-evaluation of what they are good at and what they're not good at, and build the skills around that. So I was good at the background science. I was good at the technology. The sales organization, frankly, didn't want to hear from me because I was not a salesperson. So my training leads were all salespeople that were brought out of the sales organization. They were recognized as young, very good salespeople who wanted to move into management, and they could communicate what the benefits were of the new technology and how to use it while on the phone with the customer. That's something that I could never do, right? And so another thing I quickly realized is I'm not that detail oriented. So I needed a very strong project manager who was going to be keeping track of the dates and things like that. I could communicate the vision, and so I felt very comfortable with that. But surround yourself with people who aren't necessarily like you, but complement your skill set. And so I don't know if there is a person who is going to be best, except for saying that person has to be self-aware of what good they bring to the table and what weaknesses they are, and then willing to accept those weaknesses and bring people in to round out a very robust team.
Bill, thanks so much for sharing your insights today. Our next conversation is going to be on the metrics of change and how to make change management actionable. I'm looking forward to that conversation. Please join us.